All right, let's dive right in. We're going to explore a really big, kind of unsettling question about our global economy. What if the entire system isn't just broken? What if it's actually trapped?
I mean, think about it. What if this endless cycle we see, crisis, stimulus, repeat, isn't just some temporary bump in the road? What if it is the road?
Yeah, a trap. A system that's been designed, maybe unintentionally, in a way that makes escape almost impossible without, breaking the whole thing. So that's the core idea we're going to unpack today. We're going to see exactly how this trap was built, piece by piece.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this trap, we've got to go back in time, all the way back to the moment when the very definition of money was just fundamentally changed.
The story really kicks off in 1971. That's when President Nixon cut the US dollar's final tie to gold. Now, I know that sounds like some distant, super technical decision, but believe me, it set everything that followed into motion.
And the change was absolutely profound. Think about it. Before 71, creating money had a hard limit. It was tied to a physical thing, gold. You couldn't just print more of it. But after, the only limit was, well, the decisions of policymakers. The whole system went from having physical guardrails to just relying on human judgment.
Now, this shift gave central banks some incredible new powers. The thinking was, hey, we can use these tools to smooth out the economy's bumps, stop recessions from turning into full-blown depressions. And that sounds great, right? But these powerful tools, they came with some serious side effects that nobody really saw coming for decades.
And one of the biggest side effects started to show up over the next few decades. It was this strange, repeating pattern in interest rates. And this right here is the first major piece of the trap we're talking about.
This chart shows the pattern perfectly. Look, after the super high rates back in the early 80s, every single time the economy hit a recession, what did central banks do? They cut rates to stimulate things. But here's the kicker. After the recovery, the rates never quite made it back up to where they were before the next crisis hit. It's like a staircase that only goes down, a one-way street, always trending lower.
So you have to ask, why? Why couldn't rates just bounce back up? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. And honestly, it's troubling. The answer is debt. See, lower rates made it way cheaper to borrow money. And that borrowing fueled what looked like growth. But that growth, it was built on a mountain of credit that was just getting bigger and bigger.
And just look at the scale of it today. We're talking over $300 trillion in global debt. That number is just staggering. And as that number grew, the whole global economy became incredibly sensitive to interest rate hikes. Even a tiny little increase could suddenly make borrowing way more expensive, threatening to grind the whole machine to a halt.
And this is the really crucial point here. What we've all been calling economic growth for decades, well, it might actually have been a sign of increasing fragility. It's like the system needed cheaper and cheaper money, like a drug, just to keep moving forward at all.
Okay, so this dependency on cheap money, it all came to a head in 2008. The global financial crisis. That wasn't just another recession. No way. That was the moment the trap we've been talking about slammed shut.
So, with interest rates basically at zero and the whole system still frozen solid, central banks had to pull out a new tool from their toolbox, quantitative easing, or QE. What is that? Well, in simple terms, they started creating money, literally out of thin air, to buy up things like government bonds. They were pumping cash directly into the heart of the financial system.
And listen to the words they used back then. Temporary, emergency. That's the key. But here's the thing. For the better part of the next decade, 0% interest rates and QE, that just became the baseline. The emergency measures, they never really went away. They just became the new normal.
And this new normal got put to the ultimate test in 2020. The shock from the pandemic, it just laid bare the mechanics of the trap for everyone to see. It revealed the truly impossible choice that policymakers were now facing.
So, when the world shut down, what was the response? Well, it was a repeat of 2008, but on a scale that was just unimaginable. You can see the feedback loop right here. A crisis hits, the authorities inject a massive amount of liquidity that fuels a boom in assets and even more debt. And what does that do? It makes the whole system even more fragile, which means it's going to need an even bigger bailout the next time around. See the cycle?
And this is the core dilemma. The massive stimulus eventually lit the fuse on inflation. We all felt that. But the only tool we really have to fight inflation is raising interest rates. The problem? In a world drowning in over $300 trillion of debt, Raising rates high enough to actually stop inflation could trigger a catastrophic wave of defaults, a total financial collapse. They're stuck. There is simply no painless way out.
So, if there's no easy way out, what does the future actually look like from inside this trap? I mean, if we can't go back to the way things were, where exactly are we headed?
Let's boil this down to 3 really clear takeaways. First, this isn't some temporary cycle that's just going to fix itself. It's structural. It's baked into the very DNA of our debt-based system. Second, policymakers, they're not fully in control anymore. Their choices are now super limited by that mountain of debt. And third, and this is huge, this changes everything for how we think about markets. The flow of liquidity that created money is now what drives asset prices, maybe even more than actual company profits. It creates this weird distorted reality where even unproductive zombie companies can be kept alive on nothing but cheap debt.
And all of this leads us to the final and most critical question. The system, it seems, now requires a constant IV drip of new money just to stay stable. So if creating money becomes a permanent feature of the system, not some temporary emergency measure, what does that ultimately mean for the value of your money, for your savings, for your wages, for the dollar in your pocket? That is the exit that nobody really wants to talk about.